He didn't scream. He didn't point at the sky. He didn't flip the bat. He didn't turn to the opposing dugout. He didn't even pump his fist in the direction of his own bench. He ran. He ran hard around first base, pushed through second, and when the ball caromed off the wall in deep center field, he never stopped. He slid into third base in a cloud of dust, his helmet tilting slightly to the right, his right hand pressing down on the bag with the certainty of a man who had already decided before leaving the batter's box that he was going to third no matter what. The stadium was loud. The kind of loud that makes your chest feel it before your ears register it. And in that moment, with the crowd on its feet and his teammates rising from the dugout steps and the opposing outfielders still chasing the echo of the ball, Shohei Ohtani looked up from third base. What he said in the next 60 seconds, to himself, to the third base coach, and later to pitching coach Mark Prior in the dugout, was not what anyone expected. And when Prior revealed those words to U.S. media in a quiet interview days later, the people who heard them were not just surprised. They were moved. Before you can understand what Ohtani said, you have to understand what he had just done. Because hitting a triple off Jacob Misiorowski in the middle of a pennant race is not a routine baseball play. It is not the kind of at-bat you file away as just another moment in a long season. Misiorowski had been one of the dominant stories of the entire year. His fastball was sitting at 157 km/h consistently through the 6th and 7th innings. His sweeper had generated a whiff rate that put him in the top 3% of all pitchers in the league. His changeup had become something that opposing hitters described in press conferences with the kind of reluctant admiration that only comes when you have failed against something repeatedly and come to respect it through failure. He was not just a Cy Young Award candidate on paper. He was a Cy Young Award candidate in the way that opposing managers changed their lineups when they saw his name on the schedule. In the way that veterans in opposing clubhouses went quieter than usual in their pre-game preparation. In the way that batting practice felt a little more serious, a little more focused, on the days his name appeared on the opposing lineup card. He had entered that game with a 1.81 ERA. He had not allowed a triple to any batter in the previous 11 starts. Against Ohtani, he had been meticulous. He had worked the outer half. He had mixed his sweeper with his four-seam fastball in sequences that had forced even the best contact hitters in the league into weak grounders and early count pop-ups. For 2 at-bats, the plan had worked. The third at-bat was different. It started with a fastball. 156.8 km/h, Ohtani took it. Strike 1. The second pitch was a sweeper, sharp and late-breaking. Ohtani fouled it off to the right side. Strike 2. The count was 0-2. This was Misiorowski's territory. This was where he had buried hitters all season. A put-away pitch, low and away, or something that appeared to be a fastball and arrived as something softer and less forgiving. He chose the changeup. It came out of his hand with the same arm speed and the same release point as the fastball that had started the at-bat. For the first 15 meters of its flight, it looked identical to a 157 km/h heater. Ohtani did not move early. He did not commit. He waited. And at the last possible moment, in the fraction of a second between reading the pitch and deciding what to do with his hands, he recognized it. The swing was not violent. It was not the kind of home run swing that made highlight reels because of how hard it looked. It was precise. It was short to the ball and long through it, the barrel staying in the zone just long enough to redirect all of Misiorowski's effort into the gap in left center field. The ball hit the warning track and bounced high off the wall. The left fielder got to it quickly. The relay throw was clean and accurate. But Ohtani had already rounded second with the kind of speed that reminded everyone watching that despite everything else he is, the pitcher, the slugger, the cultural phenomenon, he is also one of the fastest base runners on the field at any given moment. He slid. He was safe. Third base. 1 out. The game tied. 2 batters later, Ohtani scored on a sacrifice fly. The Dodgers took the lead. The inning ended. He jogged back to the dugout and grabbed his glove from the rack near the entrance. Mark Prior was standing near the back wall of the dugout. He had watched the entire at-bat from his usual position. He had seen the 0-2 count develop. He had seen the changeup leave Misiorowski's hand. And he had seen what Ohtani did with it. As Ohtani walked past him, Prior put a hand on his shoulder briefly. Just a touch. The kind of gesture that doesn't require words. But Ohtani stopped. He turned to Prior. And he said something. Prior didn't respond immediately. He looked at Ohtani for a moment, then nodded slowly. Then he said something back. Ohtani listened. He nodded once. And then he continued to his position on the field. The conversation lasted less than 40 seconds. But when Prior described it to a reporter from a major U.S. outlet several days later, sitting in a quiet room near the Dodgers facility, he said it was the kind of 40 seconds you don't forget quickly. The reporter had asked Prior a broad question. Something about Ohtani's adjustment process against elite pitching. Something about how the coaching staff approached his development as a hitter given that his primary identity within the organization remained as a pitcher. Prior had started answering in the expected way. Technical. Measured. The language of a pitching coach who chooses his words carefully even when discussing offense. And then he stopped. He looked at the reporter for a moment. He seemed to be deciding something internally. Whether to stay on the surface of the question or go somewhere more honest. He went somewhere more honest. There was a moment after the triple, Prior said, where he came past me in the dugout and I put my hand on his shoulder. I expected him to keep walking. He stopped. He turned to me. Prior paused there. He looked at his hands briefly. And he said, I almost didn't swing. The reporter waited. Prior continued. I asked him why. And he said, because I wasn't sure. And I don't like to swing when I'm not sure. Prior let that sit in the air for a moment before going further. And then I asked him what made him swing. And he looked at me, and this is the part one think about, he said, I decided to trust the preparation more than the doubt. I decided to trust the preparation more than the doubt. On the surface, it sounds like something an athlete would say in a motivational segment. The kind of quote that gets printed on training facility walls and used in social media graphics. But Prior made clear that in context, sitting in the Dodgers dugout with an 0-2 count still echoing and Misiorowski still standing on the mound 60 feet away, those words meant something very specific. Ohtani had studied Misiorowski for weeks. Not just the scouting reports that every hitter receives. He had requested additional footage. He had sat with the hitting coaches and gone through sequencing tendencies at length. He had identified that Misiorowski's changeup, on 0-2 counts against right-handed hitters, came in on the same plane as his four-seam fastball for the first half of its flight path before dropping and fading away. He knew the pitch was coming. He had prepared for the pitch specifically. And yet in the moment, standing in the box with 2 strikes and a full stadium and one of the best pitchers in baseball on the mound, the doubt arrived anyway. That is the part nobody talks about. That is the part that gets edited out of the highlight reel and the post-game summary. The moment between preparation and execution where doubt shows up uninvited and asks a question that has no clean answer. Ohtani felt it. He acknowledged it. And then he made a decision. Trust the preparation more than the doubt. He swung. He hit a triple. He scored the go-ahead run. And 30 seconds later, he told his pitching coach that he almost didn't do it. Prior sat with that story for a moment after telling it. He seemed almost surprised to have shared it. Not regretful. Just aware that he had given away something that felt genuinely private. A reporter asked him what he took from that conversation personally. Prior thought about it for several seconds. What I took from it, he said slowly, is that the difference between a great player and an exceptional one is not the absence of doubt. It's the decision they make when the doubt shows up. He paused again. Every hitter in that lineup had doubt against Misiorowski that night. Every single one. The difference is that Shohei had a framework for what to do with it. He had prepared so thoroughly that when the doubt arrived, he already had an answer ready. Another reporter asked whether Pryor had shared that story with other players in the organization. Pryor nodded. I shared it the next morning. I told them exactly what he said. Word for word. He was quiet for a moment. You know what the reaction was? Nobody said anything for about 30 seconds. And then one of our younger pitchers said, he said that after hitting a triple off Misiorowski? And I said yes. And he just shook his head. Pryor smiled at the memory. That was the right reaction, he said. After the game, when the final statistics were compiled and the box score was sent to the wire services, one number stood out beyond the triple itself. Misiorowski finished the game having allowed 2 earned runs. His ERA for the season moved from 1.81 to 1.96. It was the highest single-game ERA damage he had absorbed all season. Both runs traced directly back to the triple. In the Cy Young Award race, the conversation shifted slightly the following morning. Not dramatically. Not irreversibly. But enough that analysts and writers who had been treating Misiorowski as the front-runner began adding qualifiers to their assessments. Ohtani had not just hit a triple in a big moment. He had hit a triple on a pitch he almost didn't swing at, off a pitcher who had been untouchable all season, in a count where the conventional wisdom said the at-bat was already over. And then he walked into the dugout and told his pitching coach the truth about what had happened inside his own head. That was the part that shocked people when Pryor's words reached them. Not the triple. The honesty. Because great players hit triples. Great players produce in big moments. Great players rise to the occasion when the stadium is loud and the count is against them and the opposing pitcher is the best in the league. But very few of them stop afterward and say, quietly, without performance, without an audience in mind, I almost didn't do it. And here is exactly why I did. That is not the language of a superstar protecting his image. That is the language of someone who understands himself well enough to tell the truth about the moments that scare him. And that, more than the triple itself, is what Mark Pryor could not stop thinking about.